A poltergeist is a scary thing. They are different from your regular ghost and are known for moving objects around and are often incredibly violent, bringing fear and havoc to wherever they have decided to manifest themselves. So here we have 5 terrifying cases of people having run-ins with evil poltergeists. Greyfriars Kirkyard is the graveyard surrounding Greyfriars Kirk in Edinburgh, Scotland. It's rich with history. Hundreds of burials and 2 exorcisms have taken place there since the 16th century, so as you can imagine, it has its fair share of stories. One of the most popular being that of Bobby, an incredibly loyal dog who guarded his master's grave for apparently 13 years. But the graveyard is most famous for its poltergeist activities, and there is one story that is particularly terrifying. It all started in December 1998 when a homeless man was walking through the nearby streets looking for a place to shelter from the rain and wind. He wandered into the graveyard and broke into one of the old mausoleums located in the Covenanters prison section. This vault would have been pitch black, but it's believed he used some sort of light, either a torch or a lighter, to help him see. There was an old iron gate on the floor, which revealed a small twisting stone staircase that entered a second chamber. The man stumbled across 4 wooden coffins and apparently tried to smash one open, believed to be looking for some kind of treasure or any valuables he could steal. As he smashed open one of the coffins, the ground beneath him opened up and he fell through the floor into a third chamber. This chamber was a pit filled with plague victims who had died hundreds of years ago. Despite this, apparently due to the chamber being sealed well, the victims were not completely decomposed, so the man fell into a pile of semi-putrefied corpses. The man fled the scene and spooked a nearby security guard who was patrolling the area, and apparently the homeless man was never seen again. The mausoleum he broke into was named the Black Mausoleum due to the notorious residents who lay there. Ever since he broke in, strange things started happening, leading many to say he awoke some evil poltergeists. The very next day, an unnamed woman who was peering through the iron gates set into the vault's doors was reportedly blasted back off its steps by a cold force. Soon after, another female was discovered sprawled on the ground near the tomb, with her neck ringed with heavy bruising. She claimed that invisible hands had tried to strangle her. Similar injuries were found on another victim, this time a young man who was found lying opposite the vault. Edinburgh City Council eventually locked the Black Mausoleum doors and declared the location to be out of bounds, until local author Jan Andrew Henderson asked for permission to bring controlled tours to the mausoleum. The council accepted, and now the City of the Dead tours runs regular visits, and since 1998 there have been over 450 reported attacks, 180 of which people have lost consciousness. Unexplained fires break out, cold spots are frequent, and there is a high number of dead wildlife often found in the vault's vicinity. People have had hair pulled and felt as though something has punched or kicked them. Unexplained bruises, scratches and burns, skin gouges, nausea and numbness are all common experiences. An ex-police officer said that after taking part in a tour, he was at a hotel looking at a book called The Ghost That Haunted Itself, which is about the Mackenzie poltergeist, when all of a sudden he felt a sharp burning pain on his neck. He looked and could see 5 deep scratches there. After returning home, he gave the book to his mother to read, and after phoning in to check what she thought of it, she told him she too had 5 deep scratches on her neck after reading the book. Another twisted story is that petty criminal John Hayes was running from police after an incident. He hid in the Black Mausoleum and stayed there for 6 months. When he was finally found, John had gone completely insane, saying that the coffins kept him company and would move by themselves all night long. The Great Amherst Mystery. This next case is pretty old but cannot be left out, as is Canada's most terrifying poltergeist case ever recorded. It all started with a girl called Esther Cox who lived in a house in Amherst, Nova Scotia in 1878. Esther lived in the house with her siblings, and Esther's sister Olive and her husband used to rent out some of the spare rooms at the house. One time, a resident attempted to rape Esther, and after this attack, strange things began happening around the home. It's believed that due to Esther's psychological scarring caused by the attack, this led a poltergeist into the house. One of the first documentations of the ongoings was strange movements coming from underneath Esther's blanket one night. The family searched the house thinking it was a mouse, but nothing was found. The second night, it was reported that an old box that was kept under the bed was pushed out and its contents tipped on the floor by an unseen force. On the third night, things got even worse. Esther's older sister Jenny, who slept in the same bed, was woken up by the sound of Esther screaming in the middle of the room. Her skin was hot and red, and her eyes seemed to be bulging from their sockets. She was screaming, "Why is this happening to me? I'm dying," before dropping to the floor. The family members rushed into the room to help Esther, and a series of loud claps could be heard throughout the house. After staying in bed for the next 3 days and with the loud claps shaking the house, Olive and her husband contacted a local doctor. Upon his arrival, the events surrounding Esther and the home began to escalate. While at Esther's bedside, he watched her pillow move beneath her head, untouched by any hands. He saw her bedclothes thrown across the room by unseen hands and heard a scratching noise followed by a jagged clump of plaster that tore from the wall and landed at the doctor's feet. Shortly after all this, the house fell quiet. The doctor returned the next day and witnessed much more unexplained things. Items hurled themselves across rooms, strange scratching and banging noises could be heard coming from the roof of the house, and the most terrifying thing he witnessed was letters etching themselves on the wall above Esther's bed. The message was clear: Esther Cox, you are mine. Shortly after all this, the family claims to have heard the sound of a heavy slap, followed by welts rising from Esther's face. It was at this point everyone realised things were getting bad, so Esther moved out of the house and into her other sister's home miles away. It seems whatever poltergeist was haunting her had gone, as no activity was reported where Esther was staying or at her previous house, so she decided to return home. After being home, Esther decided to attend Sunday Mass at the local church. Whilst there, strange loud scratches and bangs interrupted the peaceful sermon. Everyone in the area knew of the strange happenings surrounding Esther, so she was very embarrassed and left the church, and as soon as she did, the noises completely stopped. Returning home had stirred up the poltergeist activity again. A neighbour was at her house and was sitting playing with a pocket knife. All of a sudden, it was ripped from his hands and flew into Esther's back. At this point, her family knew the poltergeist wanted to bring harm to Esther, so she moved out for a second time, this time into a friend's barn. Shortly after, the barn caught fire and was destroyed with no explanation for the cause. Her friends accused her of arson and she was arrested and convicted. Esther was sentenced to 4 months in prison and served 30 days. After her release, her life returned to normal and it seems the poltergeist had disappeared for good. A book called An Amherst Mystery was written by Walter Hubble, who was so intrigued by the Esther poltergeist case that he rented one of her home rooms. What he observed while staying there was published in his book, and he is confident that no trickery was involved. Printed in the book is a signed document with 16 people who swore to have witnessed the paranormal events that surrounded Esther Cox and the poltergeist that haunted her. Carol Compton's poltergeist. Carol Compton's story is a strange one. She lived in Ayrshire, Scotland, and in 1982 she met an Italian man who she thought was the love of her life. He was in the middle of military service, so she decided to move to Italy to be with him. Carol found a job as a nanny and settled into the Italian life, working for a wealthy religious family. One day, as she walked through the hall of their grand house, a religious painting fell off the wall in front of her. A deeply religious housemaid witnessed the incident and reported to the head of the family that she had been unsettled by what she saw, as Carol was praying as the painting fell from the wall. Days later, when Carol accompanied the family to their retreat in the Italian Alps, a series of fires broke out in their home. The family became suspicious of Carol and linked the incident to the painting, believing she had released some sort of poltergeist into their home. A few days later, she was fired and found a new nanny job with the Tonti family. At first, the job seemed perfect for her, but soon Carol started hearing scratching noises around the house and several religious statues were found smashed. The grandmother of the family started to suspect Carol and started calling her Strega or witch. Carol brushed off these ridiculous accusations, as did the rest of the family, but not long after, a fire broke out in the family's 3-year-old children's bedroom. Thankfully, the child survived, but the police were called, and because of a previous incident with fires, Carol was arrested for attempted murder. In December 1983, Carol stood trial and was found guilty of arson and attempted arson, but not guilty of attempted murder. She was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison, but as she had already been locked up for 16 months awaiting trial, her sentence was suspended and she was released. The media went wild with claims of the nanny witch, especially in Britain, where the girl they call a witch was front headlines. Even though there was never any evidence to link her to the fires or strange going-ons in the 2 family homes, to this day it's believed Carol was being followed by a poltergeist that wanted to bring nothing but evil into her life. In 1990, Carol published a book about her ordeal called Superstition: The True Story of the Nanny They Call a Witch. The book includes evidence from experts who suggested she was the victim of a poltergeist. The South Shields Poltergeist, Tyne and Wear, England. In December 2005, a young couple, Mark and Marianne, returned to their terrace house in South Shields, England, to find 2 chairs stacked on top of each other and on their table. This was the start of their poltergeist story. and over the next few months they experienced several more unexplained events, such as objects disappearing from one room and ending up in another, doors slamming by themselves when no breeze was present, often waking them up in the night, and even a chest of drawers was moved from a bedroom and onto the landing. One evening, as the couple got ready for bed, they said that the room felt unusually cold. As they turned the lights off and snuggled down for the night, Mary Ann was hit on the head with something. She immediately sat upright and turned on the lights to discover it was her son's toy dog. Moments later, she was hit with another toy, and soon the couple were being bombarded from all directions with flying objects. As they pulled the duvet around themselves for protection, they became aware of a hand trying to pull the cover from them for a few seconds, and had to wrestle with something that was trying to tug at the duvet. What happened next was even more horrific. Mark screamed in pain as long claw-like scratches appeared on his back, 13 in total. The couple got so desperate they called in paranormal investigators, and over many months the investigators witnessed and photographed many disturbances. It's reported that the poltergeist hung the couple's son's rocking horse by one rein from the loft hatch, and in another sinister incident, a large toy bunny was found sat in a chair holding a box cutter blade. The poltergeist also started writing threatening messages on a whiteboard and sent text messages to Mary Ann's phone saying, "I'm going to get you, and you're dead." The texts were attempted to be traced, but to no success. The final straw for the couple was when their child started to be moved from his bed and put on the floor. They even found him wrapped up in a cupboard, seemingly asleep but with his eyes wide open. The terrified couple have since moved out of the area and have refused to discuss the incident or identify themselves. Although no real harm was done, investigators have speculated that the poltergeist was trying to generate fear in order to be able to feed from the emotion that generates. And even today, no true explanation for the activity has been given. The Enfield Poltergeist. Due to its recent coverage in a program called The Enfield Haunting, the Enfield Poltergeist has become one of the most popular poltergeist cases in history. It all started with Margaret Hodgson and her 4 children: Billy aged 7, Johnny aged 10, Janet aged 11, and Margaret aged 12. They all lived in a council house in Enfield, UK, and in 1977, their terrifying ordeal began when a poltergeist took over their home. The activity started one night when the girls, Margaret and Janet, were in bed, and suddenly their chest of drawers started moving towards them. Their mother, who could hear the noises downstairs, went to see what was going on and told the girls to stop messing around. Then all of a sudden, the chest lurched towards her. She pushed it back, only for it to move towards her again. All that night, the terrified family were kept awake by strange noises and knocking throughout the home. This was the start of their 2-year ordeal with a poltergeist, and over the next few months, the family continued to experience knocking on the walls and furniture moving seemingly by itself. They also had Lego bricks and marbles thrown at them, and fires would light around the house then spontaneously extinguish themselves. On more than one occasion, Janet was thrown from her bed and apparently levitated in the air with toys swirling around her. This was witnessed by 2 passers-by who could see it through the bedroom window. Shortly after, a priest and a police officer were called in, but neither could resolve or explain the activity. Both, however, acknowledged that it was happening, which for some adds strong credibility to the Enfield case. Things continued to get worse, and Janet was often physically attacked, one time being strangled by her bedsheets, and if it wasn't for her mother, things may have turned bad. Eventually, paranormal investigators were called in, Maurice Grosse and Guy Leon Playfair, who recorded over 2,000 unexplained events within the home. They witnessed Janet being dragged from her bedroom and down the stairs, a cast iron Victorian fireplace ripped from the wall, which weighed 60 pounds and could not have been lifted by the children, and when Janet began barking, things took an even darker turn. They were all sat downstairs when Janet started doing this, so Maurice decided to ask questions. The spirit coming through Janet was thought to be a man called Bill, who previously lived and died in the house. It was first thought that Janet was faking the voice, but investigations showed it would have been almost impossible for her to keep up such a voice that came from the false vocal cords deep in the throat, and after her mouth was filled with water and taped up, the voice could still clearly be heard. The investigators are confident she was not messing around.
Come on, my name's Morris. Let me hear you say it.
Morris.
Why can't Janet feel you?
I'm invisible.
You're invisible? Why are you invisible?
I'm a G-H-O-S-T.
The voice does sound like an old man, and when those recordings were played to the man's son it was believed to be, he is confident it was his father coming through, leading the investigators to believe Janet was indeed possessed by Bill and was not faking the voice. Around 2 years after the first strange event in the home, all the activity stopped. Now, it was believed the children were playing along with the story and exaggerating at times, but to this day, Janet is adamant that everything that happened in that house was real, and senses the poltergeist will always be with her. So that's 5 terrifying poltergeist stories. If you have any of your own stories, we would all love to hear them, so leave them in the comments, or send me an email and I can hopefully use it for a future video. As always, thanks for watching and see you next week for another video.